다음 네 번째 발표는 네덜란드 프리바 동부가 지부 마뉴엘 마다니 지부장님께서 수익성과 지속 가능성을 위한 농업 기업가의 기술 도입을 주제로 발표해 주시겠습니다. 큰 박수 부탁드립니다.
Okay, hi everybody. My name is Manuel Madani. I will not be talking about robots or about other sensors applied on humans, but I will talk about plants. And here in Jeonju, there is something brewing, also in the rest of Korea. It's called smart farm technology. The smart farm technology is used to solve a lot of big problems. And I will be presenting a topic called future food-producing cities are livable cities. Not so much from the consumption point of view, but with entrepreneurs, with bringing food closer to city as they were in the beginning. So as you know, we have a lot of challenges. Farmers are getting older, also in Japan and Korea, but also we have lots of smallholder farmers in the rest of Asia. People talk that this is the last generation of farming. We have a growing world population, but actually what's beating us is climate change. And climate change, every degree that's getting hotter, we lose around 10% of our harvest. So I'm really happy that in Korea, there are a few keys unfolding that I'm very excited about, because it will have effect on the rest of APAC, and really, really much needed. So a little bit about ourselves. We are over 65 years old. We invented the first climate computer, a climate computer that would simulate microclimates inside greenhouses and vertical farms. 2 decades later, we brought fertigation systems, irrigation systems, which revolutionized how we feed plants. And today we use around 40 AI applications to make decisions on vision technology and much more. Which brings us to this. We are now allowed to bring the food system to the green belt and perhaps even in the cities. A bit about our perspective. So this was the first greenhouse or so-called smart farm 60 years ago where that gentleman is standing. Climate has changed, so greenhouses and food factories also have changed. Higher, more technology, anticipative on what the climate is doing. Laws, not innovative. Policies created the biggest breakthroughs ever. The biggest innovation that we've had in a century was actually a very simple one. The law that allowed farmers not to grow food in the soil using heavy chemicals. And that lifted everybody outside of the soil. Water recycling was a law, buffering energy was a law, and then the final one was later, no more pesticide, no more chemicals. So all these laws create new innovations. And what's coming next, we don't know. But we are very excited about it, that it's already high on the agenda. And we see all around us in Korea and also elsewhere in Asia that more is coming. So we started in horticulture, in building automation, indoor growing, but we moved all the way back because what's needed is an ecosystem, and it helps green grounds. And green grounds are areas in and around the cities that require master planning. As a manufacturer, we've made of all these systems ourselves for the last 7 decades. But we've done so much nice projects that we learned from the Eden project in the UK, to cluster greenhouses, to retractable roofs, to Gardens by the Bay in Singapore where we contributed to, but also landmarks in building automation. So we went from controls, data services to AI, digital twin technology, and everything added up. It added up to producing the maximum amount of kg, of kilograms, but the most sustainable way. And in buildings, it was saving energy, but still providing that particular comfort. And also new entrepreneurs can get to work to produce something for their restaurants or for the retail around the corner. But it's here. We've been emigrating to cities. That's also where the solution unlocks a lot of opportunity. Today, we have assessed cities on their food security. And if we were to assess a city like London, what has happened over all those decades, London has a huge green belt where food was being produced. Today, there's no more food coming. All the farmers have been pushed away for decades. And we've only looked at their brown fields, which is the empty spaces from the old economy, and redid the thinking. And we found out that London can feed itself with only its brown fields with 60%. Imagine also how many jobs and how many entrepreneurs can get to work. We've done the math for New York City, same story, and we didn't integrate the food system in a city. So it comes to this, green belts and brown fields. We can do the numbers, there's 70 years of experience. So we need to think in how we are going to approach and resolve the farming and food crisis that's upcoming. So we've done work for Singapore, for Shanghai. A lot of governments are thinking on how to get more entrepreneurs excited to grow food. One of the special ones is Singapore. I think Singapore is known as a city where there's no space to make farming interesting and exciting. And actually, Singapore has a huge green belt in Lim Chu Kang with over 400 hectares. So converting that into a smart food factory would allow Singapore to feed itself of 60, even beyond that level. So we were 2 years in a project advising the government to preserve biodiversity, but also to really increase the level of production. So we made farm types. What comes in, what goes out? Is there any waste stream that's needed? How can we make things more circular? We've assessed the intake of energy and water and production facilities. But we also use a holistic approach. You see, in the new way of thinking, we need to connect waste streams and make things as carbon neutral as possible. This is not underground, this is above ground, because it allowed, by creating a mountain, it allowed it to also preserve trees and wildlife and birds. One of the other cities that was very interesting, also of age, which is Lisbon. A different exercise, but in Lisbon, there was this huge amount of land, old steel factory. We couldn't use the soil anymore. But since we don't grow food in the soil anymore, we could make the scenario also here, creating new zones, and finding new entrepreneurs, purposing land where we have the food belt in the city, and also creating clusters. So how do we connect and excite the youth, the next generation, to become very excited to become a tech ag entrepreneur? Simply by the holistic approach, by connecting the social coherence on where food's coming from. Not only producing in mass scale, but also make it a bit more of leisure, an edible forest, connecting where food is coming from to the food market. It's much wider and so exciting if you would have this opportunity to bring this all together. When we look at the Netherlands, in where we were born, there's around 12,000 hectares of greenhouses. To give you a bit of perspective, a field crop on land would produce 7 kg of tomatoes. In these greenhouses, per square meter, it's about 120 kg with 5 or 6 liters of water. So food is being produced at the most sustainable way. And it's very close to where people live. The average entrepreneur makes over $1 million a year. So farming is not only for the poor people. Geothermal is being used to reduce the cost price. But also CO2 is being captured from wasted factories, which is very interesting because plants use CO2. So it requires an ecosystem, not only for vegetables, but also this is the most sustainable chicken farm. It's carbon neutral, but also the green camel in Australia. It's an aquaponic farm where lettuce is being produced on high scale, and underneath that layer of lettuce, there's a large amount of fish. The floating dairy farm, I think some of you might have visited in Rotterdam. It's maybe not the most amount of liters of produce, but it increases the livelihood, and people find it very interesting to live around a floating dairy farm that's produced in the city. This actually increased the real estate of that particular area where this dairy farm is coming from. Mushrooms are thriving. But all these innovations for 70 years add up to something that we should have resolved a long time ago. So we're keeping a system alive that we didn't invent, we inherit. We domesticated food and agriculture, and we took it for granted. We subsidized, and we even more subsidized. Until we came to the conclusion that with climate change, we're giving $700 billion in subsidies, tariffs, and other things to keep it alive. And yet the underdog of creating food in and around the city proves to be 1 or 2%, but the most sustainable way. And I'm excited because in Korea it's actually happening, in one of the first countries in Southeast Asia, or in the whole of APEC. So it comes down to the city, the entrepreneur, and its residents. We're working, I think I've been here in the last months 4 or 5 times. It's a 10-year journey, so there's not so much time left. And we work with city planners, governments, and architects, city developers to get this off the ground. And you need to really boost the social coherence. All problems are also, when you start resolving this, are actually connected. We've proven it. World exporter number 2, one of the tiniest countries on earth, and arable land is even not purposed for agriculture. A food-producing city is a city where people live in agriculture, not hundreds of kilometers pushed away. It started with an ambition. After the war, it was one of the poorest countries on the planet. Famine hit, and the government really pushed legislators to consolidate land and make people work together to produce the right amount of produce. But one important innovation came through, and that spinned off everything else, which was the chemicals were not supposed to be used in the soil. Innovation came when we went out of the soil, and then climate control, water management, energy solutions, it went through and through and through, and every year we produce more and more. And it's also about integrated solutions. So farming is not something that happens very far, but energy networks, heating and cooling can also be connected. So in winters you provide heating, in summers you provide cooling, and the crop needs to have it other way around. Also wastewater streams. So cities' wastewater can be cleaned up, doesn't need to be discharged. We touched upon this, but also the most sustainable tuna fishing, not in sea, but on land. The floating dairy farm. So the green belts and brown fields are being neglected. And they offer such a big perspective. If we were to get a prioritization over real estate or over hotels or over a shopping mall, but we need to go to scale, and that's why a whole government, a whole region can make this a purpose to attract those entrepreneurs and produce the right amount of food for its people in and around the city. But we need to go to scale, and scale is very important because what I really am passionate about is when food really is being consumed from close by. The system fails, and still of today, how can it be that salad, which requires that amount of resource that I've told you about, less resources, and the hamburger is still cheaper. The subsidies that I've told you about. So the challenge is not just about technology. It's all about policy. And I'm very happy that cities in and around the world are really thinking it through. We have a problem. We have, I think the youngest farmer, or the average age is nearing 60. I was in Japan, in Osaka, 2 weeks ago. The youngest farmer there was 65 years old, and he was thinking about retirement. So it's not just about technology, it's all about the ambition. I'm also proud of cities that aspire to really make this change happen. And Jeonju is actually becoming a very interesting place. When you go in and around the city, you will see more greenhouses, more food factories popping up. Resilient for climate change, but also providing a good ecosystem. Like, I'm also very happy to see that entrepreneurs are moving more towards the rural areas, growing strawberries and lettuce and other crops. So it's becoming very exciting what's unfolding here. So it's about the people, the entrepreneurs, and the cities that have it. So I truly believe that in the near future, that where food is being produced locally and not being pushed away with all this foodflation and crazy imported apples from the US or meat, it should be creating jobs, and it should really be nurturing the local society. So food-producing cities are green, circular, and also give a low-carbon footprint. So in Jeonju, when you have that mindset, the change is actually right in front of us. And with that said, and some spare time on the clock, thank you very much.